Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Leadnap Gaming. Today there's still a lot of traffic going over to the 3.5 flight model tutorial I did, and back then we didn't have some of the new features we have, and really that tutorial was made to translate the old flight model into the new one. So what I've gone ahead and decided to do now is make a new tutorial for 3.6.1 that covers how to use the flight model and how to fly. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit the red button down below because you're not going to want to miss future updates to these tutorials. Let's go ahead and start with reading the HUD symbology. On the bottom left we see our hydrogen fuel level, which is currently at 90%. Next we can see that I have 8 flare countermeasures available. This isn't really important for maneuvering, but that's what that means. Between these two, sometimes you'll see a Q and then some numbers, which is the percentage of quantum fuel we have on hand as well. Next is the G meter to inform us of how many Gs we're pulling, similar to that found on a fighter jet. And after that, we have the alert symbols for various ship states. These icons will include Decoupled Mode, which we'll cover a little later, landing gear being down, and the normal flight mode. From there we have our control gauges. On the left is our throttle control. Think of this as a hybrid between your car's gas pedal, the cruise control, and the conventional throttle that you find in a boat or a jet. To control our speed, we're going to set the desired speed using the speed limiter, which is this white line on the inside of the gauge, and then we'll move that with the mouse wheel by default. The red line there is the maximum maneuvering detent. If we keep our speed under this line, our ship's maximally responsive. The higher we go above it, though, the less responsive our ship is to our commands. We'll come back to this later, too. On the right side, we have our thrust throttle, which is controlled with the right alt and mouse wheel by default. This system is very important for fine maneuvering and planetary hovering, but for now just think of it as the power lever for our engines and thrusters. Principal movement in space is done via maneuvering thrusters and the ship's primary engines. This is generally operated in the form of strafing. The W and S keys control our strafe forward and back. A and D left and right. Think of these strafe commands like the gas pedal in your car. When you press them, you accelerate uniformly until the limiter setting, which will then hold the speed for as long as you hold the key down. When you let off the key, the engines no longer accelerate, and the ship begins to decelerate until a stop. Generally, strafe commands are used for short movements like landing or takeoff and not general flight. Hence, your ship uses directional thrusters to slow you when you come off the strafe. Strafe also includes vertical changes, spacebar to ascend, and left control to descend. Likewise, Q and E are roll commands. You can reduce your forward speed by thrust back, and vice versa, or you could use the space brake, which will more quickly limit your movement. The space brake is X by default, and it's very important to know how to use it. Normal flight is performed via cruise mode, which operates like the cruise control in your car. By pressing C by default, you enter cruise mode, and an arrow appears on the outside of the throttle control opposite the limiter. Now the ship will fly at a specified speed to the limiter and maintain that speed as best it can. From here, you can now use your mouse wheel like a conventional throttle, advancing the limiter up or down to adjust your speed. To steer when moving, you simply turn the mouse intuitively in the direction you wish to go. This is true in either strafe or cruise modes. Now let's talk about the central icons on your HUD. This cross is simply a center point indicator for the HUD to help you maneuver back to center. The circle is your steering command. Moving and placing the circle on your desired vector will direct the ship to maneuver there. When maneuvering, the third indicator will appear. This is the actual vector indicator. This indicates where the ship is actually traveling. Speeds under the maximum maneuvering detent, you'll notice, will keep this very close to your commanded vector. But as you increase speed above that line, the ship takes more time to match the command. An object in motion stays in motion until an equal and opposite force alters it. Your maneuvering thrusters are far less powerful than your primary engines. However, they eventually will attain the desired speed set by the limiter, though it may take dramatically longer than your main engines for forward thrust. This can be demonstrated as such. I can use my side thruster only to eventually reach high speed flying sideways. You can also strafe on top of cruise mode, which can be very useful while dogfighting. While in cruise mode, you can also decouple, which takes advantage of the Newtonian principle I mentioned a moment ago. Once your ship is traveling in a direction at a speed, you can decouple with V by default, which will place the icon on the HUD and allow you to change the orientation of the ship while remaining on the original vector you were before. This is very useful for dogfighting or orientating turrets. However, this essentially prevents you from steering, though you could still strafe, and you may not be able to see where you're flying. Cruise mode is not a prerequisite for decoupled flight, but if you forget to recouple, the flight controls and commands will be relative to the original defined vector and can make for some very interesting piloting disasters, especially when trying to land. Now let's talk about precision flight. In the old flight model we had a precision mode, which was activated by putting your landing gear down. Now you have to set the conditions for it manually, which is actually a good thing because you get far more control this way. Remember that speed under the maximum maneuvering detent results in higher control. You can reduce the limited speed to only a few meters per second by dropping the throttle way down. For reference, the old precision mode limited speeds to 50 meters per second and under. Thrust control is also very important, and it effectively plays a critical role in spaceflight here. It is much more important for planetary flight, but we're not going to cover that today. The lower the thrust level, the slower the acceleration from the engines occurs. Thus, if you want to slowly maneuver, drop both your thrust and limit your maximum speed. Most pilots will ignore the thrust in fine flight and accept slow speeds for control. Alternative to this, you could greatly limit thrust while maintaining a higher limiter speed. Thrust control is the finer control. And remember, for landing operations, finesse is the key in Star Citizen. Don't forget to put down your landing gear. As currently there's no drag penalty for having the gear down, it's best when approaching the station to lower your gear so you can forget about it. In some ships, this may also help reduce the size or profile of the ship, such as this Reliant, which turns in landing mode. Now let's talk about fuel and Afterburner. Left shift is the Afterburner by default, and this will accelerate you rapidly to the commanded speed. This, however, will burn a lot of fuel. Space braking also burns a lot of fuel, since the brake is the opposite thrusters firing at overpower. For planetary flight, hovering also consumes fuel. Your ship has a finite supply of hydrogen fuel, though some ships like the Warden have scoops to replenish it on their own slowly. Prior to 3.6, fuel was dirt cheap. Now it's expensive, so consume it thoughtfully. Until fuel mechanics in 3.7, maybe, you'll have to go to an R&R, a city port, or a station to refuel. And if you don't have enough fuel to get back to one of those, you're not going to make it. Last but not least is quantum travel, which uses quantum fuel and the quantum drive. Quantum travel is best done via the Mobiglass, F1, and then the star map. Use the map to set your route and it will give you a readout about how much quantum fuel you need and how much you have. Once that's done from the pilot seat, click B to spool the quantum drive. Follow the cue to point at the quantum travel destination marker and line up the site with the destination. Two values will be critical here. Your drive spools on command and must be 100% to jump. You must also calibrate 100% to the jump, and calibration occurs automatically when the site is lined up, and will slow the more you come off of it. Once both are at 100%, press and hold B until the jump initiates. You can let go once the initiation begins. Press and hold B to cancel the jump at any time during the jump, which will stop the jump wherever you are. If you don't set a route, pressing B will also bring up all available destinations on your HUD, and you can point to the one you want. This can also be really useful sometimes if you're going down to a station on a planet, because it will show you the way even if you can't jump to it. A quick few notes on quantum travel. You might have to jump to orbital markers, OMs, to see their destination. And to travel to destinations in a system, you have to travel to the system first. For example, that means if you want to go to Lyria, you must first travel to the ArcCorp system in ArcCorp, and then to Lyria. You can use Decoupled Mode to orient and cue the quantum drive while traveling in a different direction. You cannot jump from planetary atmosphere or if atmosphere is blocking you, but you can jump from armistice zones in space. Quantum drives have to cool down, and the duration of that depends on the quality of the drive and how long the last jump was. You can still calibrate during a cooldown though, so press B to spool, and then press B again once the cooldown is done, if doing so. If you're going into a jump and it starts to shake violently and an alarm sounds, you're being interdicted. Two groups do this, pirates and UEE police. As soon as the shaking and whatnot begins, press and hold B to try to avoid it. If it's pirates, accelerate to full power and escape. You'll have to cancel your route and then reset it to be able to re-jump. If it's the UEE police, however, stop as fast as possible, space brake, turn the ship, which will slow you rapidly as well, and come to a complete stop as fast as possible. These are really the worst of the two because if you don't stop fast enough, you'll gain a crime stat and they'll try to kill you. Pirate NPCs currently suck at this, but the crime stat will ruin your week. For this reason, I usually enter jumps with cruise off and stopped if possible. If you enter a jump in motion, you'll exit in similar motion. All jump exits have some speed though. You generate heat during a jump, and you can overheat, which will drop you from the jump early. Cool down, and then jump again. Shutting off shields can greatly reduce the heat during the jump, and having better coolers will also help. Bigger ships can jump further without overheating, and different ships jump at different speeds. Alright folks, that was long, but hopefully it covered it all. Best thing you can do now is to practice. Do check out this how to hover video that I did to get the lowdown on planetary flight, but from here you should know pretty much what you need to know to be dangerous to yourself at least, and maybe some others. And always be careful around stations since bumping them causes fines, and don't forget to request landing at stations, R&Rs, and cities. Questions or comments, let's talk below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and do check us out on Facebook. As always, I'll catch you all next time.